income quadrupled. I went from making $3,000 a month to $12,000 a month. Welcome back to my channel. This is my first official video related to nursing content. This week I am here to talk to you about how to become a travel nurse. So before we get started, I just want to give you some tips that might come in handy if you don't know about them. I hope everyone is doing well, and I appreciate you coming back to kick it with me, so let's dive in. Talking this week about how to become a travel nurse is important because in the career of nursing, you're gonna want to know how to maximize your income because staff nursing is not paying as much as travel nursing or being an internal contract nurse. When I started working in 2021, I started in 2020. I, as a new grad, was making $30 an hour. Times 12 hours, times 3 days a week. Let's do the math. That's $3,000 a month. As a nurse, staff nurse. When I started my first contract in Manchester, New Hampshire, I signed my contract for $3,034 for 1 week. So I went from making $1,500 every 2 weeks to $3,000 every week. To be making base rates of $41.50 per hour. So already I'm starting my first contract at $11.50 more than what I was making as a staff nurse a year later. It's a big increase, right? When I worked over 40 hours, my overtime rate was $82.69. Y'all best believe I ran up that overtime rate at my first contract. So let's see, $41.50 times 12 times 3 is $14.94. So already in 1 week, I'm making what I would get paid in 2 weeks working as a staff nurse, just from my base pay. So this doesn't include my stipend for housing and food. Let's add in that. So I went from making $1,500 every 2 weeks to $3,000 every week. My income quadrupled. I went from making $3,000 a month to $12,000 a month. It is extremely important that you take the time to do your research before you go, because if you're not handling your money well at $3,000, you're not going to manage $12,000 well. Budgeting is your friend. So after that contract in Manchester, COVID was kind of slowly coming down and the rates were slowly coming down, and so I maintained making $2,500 a week for a year and a half after leaving Manchester, New Hampshire. Now I have signed my most recent contract for $2,000 a week, and that's really just because of where I want to be settled at right now, closer to my friends and to my family. And so I'm willing to make $500 less, but I mean, it's still better than making, anywhere from $30 to $45 an hour as a staff nurse, getting paid twice a week. A lot of hospitals offer internal contracts. Most times it's kind of like a seamless process to do that too. So say you're already working somewhere as a staff nurse and you really love your unit, you really love your area of work, you want to be there, but you just want to make more money. So what you want to do is just talk to your manager and ask if they have an internal contract option, and if they do, how do you do it and can you do it? As an internal contract nurse, you do not get paid a stipend, you get paid a higher base rate. So that can be anywhere from $70+ and all of your paycheck is taxed. But from the internal contract nurses that I've met and talked to, they are making roughly about the same as the external nurses, except maybe a couple of $100 because their whole paycheck is taxed. When you become a travel nurse, you're going somewhere else to work that is not your home. So travel nurses are expected to maintain a residence at home, and you are required to visit and stay at that residence for 30 days out of the year. I do not spend all my 30 days consecutively at home, but I do take time off to travel. Travel nurses get a stipend, which helps pay for your housing and your meals wherever you go to work. You're required to work 50 plus miles away from wherever you live to be considered a travel nurse and to receive the stipend. This is far enough that you can just simply go to the next city over and drive to work, or you can really go anywhere. You can go out of the country as well. So if you are renting an apartment, so to speak, I would suggest getting a storage unit and putting your stuff in a storage unit and subleasing your apartment, or waiting until your apartment lease is coming to an end before leaving, because it doesn't make sense for you to be paying $1,200 plus in rent at home and then going and paying anywhere from $6,000 to $2,000 or more, depending where you go and rent there. It's not letting you keep a lot of the stipend that helps you to gain more income, right? Your home address can simply be your license address. So I was renting an apartment, and when I started travel nursing, I was using my home address for my parents' home. I pay my parents rent, and that is my permanent address. It's been my permanent address. I've just lived other places, right? What you're going to want to do is create a lease agreement with your parents if that's who you're choosing to use. You can use a friend, you can use a family member, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want, as long as you have proof that that is your home and primary residence. It's easier when your permanent address is the address that is on your license, but it isn't required. So you want to have a lease agreement, you want both parties to sign it, and you want to be paying a substantial amount of rent to your home location. They're expecting that you're keeping up with the place of residence, that you're paying your mortgage or rent, that you're not just letting the place go to ruins. So you want to look in the area to determine what the average price of rent is there, or mortgages, to determine how much you need to pay. And this will help you to not get flagged by the IRS. So when it comes to looking at how to determine how much you should be paying at rent at home, unless you're paying a fixed mortgage, you know, that isn't your issue, you're paying a rent, that's just what it is to go on Zillow, go on apartments.com for a similar house, for a similar apartment, bedroom, baths, all of that, and just see what it is to kind of know where to price yourself. Now, when you go to live in this other place that you're going to work in, we want to be mindful of how much you're paying in rent. I have rented rooms in someone's house. I have lived in my own space. Renting a room has always been the cheaper option, and it has allowed me to save more money. The other benefit of renting a room is that I have personally only rented rooms in houses of women, and this is just for my own safety. Anything can happen, so I just feel more comfortable there. But you have the possibility of becoming great friends with whoever you're living with. I have many different travel moms. In almost every state I've lived in, I have gained a travel mom amongst many friends. These are people I keep up with still, and that's the beauty of travel nursing, is when you go somewhere, maybe you're going back to visit a place you already worked in, like, you're gonna have people there to go see or let you stay with them, etc. So that is a benefit. The thing to note is that wherever you decide to travel nurse, you can stay somewhere for up to a year. You can re-sign, renew, work at the same hospital for up to a year. However, once you have reached that year mark, you will be considered a resident of the state and you will no longer receive a stipend. That's just something to consider if you find somewhere you like and you want to stay there. My next tip is that it is okay to work with multiple agencies. This is actually going to increase your chances of having more job opportunities, and a lot of agencies have different pay rates for the same job. So it's important to see what the comparisons are, what the opportunities are, and by doing this, you open the door for yourself. Now, I can recommend a couple of agencies, but there's so many that you are not limited to one or another. And the best piece of advice I can give is to not burn your bridges. Unless a recruiter or agency is just treating you very badly, they're unreliable, they're giving you false advertisements, then leave them alone. But if you come across a great recruiter, it is immaculate to have someone that you can rely on and that you can trust with this work, because this is your work, this is your livelihood, and you want to be able to trust who you're working with. And you want to know that you have a good recruiter. So I recommend taking time to talk to the recruiter. Don't just let them sign you up for a job. Talk to them, see what they're about, see if they're actually good and they care, or if they just want you for the money. Some agencies that I would recommend, I can list beside me here, and one that I have to point out is called Vivian. Vivian is a comparison app for agencies. You sign up for Vivian, you get to see multiple postings from multiple agencies in your specialty, every specialty, and this can help you decide which agency to go with. Because you can work with multiple agencies, another big important rule is to not apply for the same job through different agencies. This is a no-no. This will get you not the job, and it will get you blackballed. They will recognize your name and know not to hire you. So don't do that. Apply through one agency. If you see a better rate with another agency, oh well, things can change. If you decide to work with a different agency after you've worked with another one, no harm, no foul. The biggest thing you want to do is, like I said, not burn your bridges. Do not be afraid to tell your recruiter, hey, I found a job. I can reach back out to you at a later point when I'm ready for a new contract. You can give as little or as much detail as you want. Most time, in my experience, they're nice about it. You know, these are people I've built a rapport with, and they just want me to have a successful career, whether it's with them or not. I haven't worked with anyone ugly in spirit, thankfully, so if you run across someone like that, I would steer clear. My next tip is that you have a compact license and you want to work somewhere that doesn't accept it. All you got to do is apply. Sometimes those states will offer quick licenses where you can get it in under a certain amount of time. I've gotten mine in 2 weeks before to go to Washington. Other times it can take a bit longer, especially now that we're out of like the COVID pandemic. Things are kind of going back to normal with that. So depending on the time frame will determine when you can apply and start a job. So if you want to go somewhere different, maybe do it in advance before your contract ends to know that you'll be ready when it becomes time. You just have to verify your identity and apply and pay the fee. You don't have to take any tests or anything like that to get the license. Next, when you are looking for contracts, they will have rates posted based on the shifts you are working. You can work nights, days, mids, variables. Mids are 8-hour shifts, morning, evening, nights. And variable is flipping between day and night. You also will see the rate based on how many days a week you're working, whether it be 3, 4, or 8. You can work 12, 10, 8-hour shifts. Sometimes rates will be posted for 4 12-hour shifts, and it will be, a very good rate. But say you don't want to work 4 days a week, you can ask your recruiter to submit you for 3 days a week for a lower rate, not including that extra shift. Okay. I like that option because if you don't pick up 4 days a week, you have the option to work overtime or to not. So don't feel like you have to work your life away. Work-life balance is so important. Contracts come in different lengths. The shortest I've seen, like I said, is the crisis and strike, 18 days. But sometimes, 4 weeks up to 26 weeks is what I've seen contracts listed for. The longer contracts is usually because they really do need the help. Typically, your average contract length is 13 weeks. And with that being said, I do not recommend signing for longer than 13 weeks when you first start. I made the mistake of doing that one time, and I signed after a month of being there, and the next month was literally the worst month, and I wanted to leave so bad, but I had just signed for like 5 more months. I stayed there for 8 months, and it was a great experience. They gave me all the time off that I asked for. I literally took a month off, and it was part of my contract that I took that month off. It can be a rude awakening when the hype of going somewhere new, being happy that you're there, when that wears off, you've re-signed for an extended period of time, you're kind of like, shoot. You have an obligation to fulfill. You signed a responsibility, and it's the right thing to do to fulfill your responsibility as a travel nurse. We're in need, we're being relied upon. I mean, you can resonate. Travel nurses have the option to resonate. Don't ever get it twisted. We're not stuck. It can also affect your chances of being rehired somewhere. The beauty of that is we always have jobs. I don't suggest re-signing until you're getting to the end of your contract. I would say maybe 3 to 4 weeks before your contract is over to decide whether you want to extend or not. And whether you want to do it for a whole 13 weeks or not, because that is an option that you have. You can do 6 weeks, 4 more weeks, 2 more weeks, whatever you want. They might say no, they want you to be here for longer than that, or they can only offer you 6 more weeks instead of 13, but hey, take what you can get or leave. When it comes to re-signing, there are a couple things you can do to help maximize your income further. Every time you re-sign to stay at the same hospital, ask your recruiter for a raise. And if you re-sign for up to 8 months like I did, I started out at $40 and I left at $45. So I mean, $5 increase is nice. Also ask for a completion bonus. At the end of your re-signed contract, you completed another contract, ask for a completion bonus. This can be anywhere from $5,000 to $5,000. This could be anywhere from $500 to $1,000. My next tip is that the beauty of being a travel nurse is that you get paid weekly, and I love getting paid weekly. You don't have to plan for 2 weeks out, a month out. You get paid every single week. Try to set aside money for when you're transitioning between contracts and you're maybe having a 1 to 3 week gap in pay, or if you're deciding to take some time off between your contracts. I've taken up to 2 months off between contracts before, and it's always nice to have a little extra money set aside because you know you're not going to get paid those couple of weeks. My next tip is that you have to be mindful of if you're going to take a crisis response contract or a strike contract. So there will be a crisis response listed in the description depending on what agency you're looking through. This crisis response means that they have a need urgently. They need to get you in there urgently. Strike means their nurses are going on strike. They need you to come ASAP, and it can change at any point. So this is what I want to make note about. If you choose to do a crisis or a strike contract, you have to be mindful that at any point the strike or the crisis can end and they can cancel you. They can cancel your contract and you're just out. The other thing is that your pay can change depending on the needs. Some of their nurses come back, they don't have such a high need for you anymore, they can drop your rate. Also to note, this can happen at contracts that are not crisis or strike related. You can start a contract somewhere and sign for a rate and a term, and halfway through your contract, that rate can be dropped with or without you knowing. It is always supposed to be with you knowing because you're supposed to get a notice before it changes to allow you the option to decide whether you want to stay or whether you want to leave. When deciding whether to stay or not after a rate change, look and see what other jobs are available for what rate. Does it make sense to leave to make more, but to have to spend the money to go somewhere else? Or does it make sense to accept a couple $100, sometimes $1,000 less? The more money that is dropped, usually, people aren't going to go for that, and that's understandable. This is what I signed my contract for, and now you're changing it. You have the right to leave. My next tip is that maintaining a per diem or PRN nursing job can really come in benefit. Say your rate gets changed, your contract gets canceled in the middle, and now you don't have a job. Well, you still have that PRN that you can go work until you decide what you're going to do next. Or if you decide to take a month or 2 off in between jobs, you have a job to go work until you start working again. But when doing this, if you want to keep the job that you had when you were working staff nurse, keep that bridge. Let your managers know I am going to be leaving, and do it in a respectful way. Do it in a way that you're not boasting that you're going to travel nurse, that you're not boasting that you have a new job, but do it in a way saying like, I need to take some time away. I would like to stay PRN. I would like to still work here. They don't need to know all your business. Just try to keep that bridge. Try to keep that job. My next tip is to do everything up front. You want to ask for any time off requests that you want, any scheduling needs that you need up front. So it's in your contract before you sign it, so it's honored when you start working. I have worked at places that have only allowed you 5 days off, and I have also worked somewhere where I took a whole month off. It is important to have that in your contract before you start so that you don't have to fight to get your schedule right during the contract. You want to see if you get extra pay if you work charge nurse, if you get extra pay for any shift differentials, which most times you do not. And you want to see if you can have guaranteed call-off hours and sick pay. Having guaranteed call-off hours means that if the hospital doesn't need you, you're still going to get paid for those hours because you were supposed to work. Most times your contract has up to 36 hours of getting called off without being paid before you begin to get paid for being called off. So they try not to call the travelers off after that point because they're still going to pay us regardless of if we come or not. Another thing to ask is if you have sick pay. If you are to call out of work for being sick, will they still pay you for that shift? You just won't get your stipend. If they're not going to offer you sick pay, you're just not going to make that money, or you're going to have to pick up a day later in the week if you can. You can also have something in there to differentiate whether you are going to be floating or not floating. You can ask to not float, and if it's in your contract, they cannot float you. Not every hospital is going to honor that because hospitals need help. My next tip is to know your limits. Know what patient to nurse ratios you're willing to accept. Know how much you're willing to work for. Know how long you're willing to work for, where you're willing to work, and where you are not willing to work. And this can help you make a decision about a job easier is if you know your limits. It is important to know what's happening where you're moving to. What's happening in the news, what the crime rate is, what the cost of living is, because these things can determine your safety, but also how you are doing financially. Because if you're moving somewhere where the cost of living is exponentially high, but your specialty is not being paid to keep up with that and also maintain your home residence, you're not going to be pocketing as much money as you want, and we're doing this to make money, right? Take that into consideration. My next tip is to watch these agency websites weekly, daily, but keep up with what the rates are where there are to help you know what you're going to be having as options when the time comes for you to go somewhere new or to start applying. Usually new jobs are posted like Monday through Wednesday, and then towards the weekend, nothing's really happening because it's the weekend. Recruiters don't really work over the weekend. Still apply even if it is the weekend, because Monday they can submit you and Tuesday you can get the offer for the job and sign the contracts. Just don't be afraid to apply even if it's the weekend, but know that you're not gonna talk to anyone until Monday probably. Something I also like to recommend is looking at and looking up nursing groups on Facebook, like travel nursing groups, maybe for a specific area or agency or just maybe in general, but having somewhere where you can go and talk to people who have maybe experienced some of the same things or can answer questions from a different perspective. Maybe they've been doing it longer, they have a better understanding of what to expect. It's also a great place to say like, hey, I'm coming here, I'm looking for this. Does anyone know of this? Does anyone live out here? Does anyone have any recommendations of this hospital? Do you know anything about this hospital, about this floor, about this specialty at this hospital? And there's so many travel nurses. I see people on there all the time just chatting away with each other and letting people know where to avoid, where to go. People will post, bad experience, stay away from here, or phenomenal experience, would highly recommend. So it's a great place to just have an overview of kind of what's going on in the travel nursing world. It's a great place to hear from OG nurses as well regarding pay. As I saw the pay rates coming down, I'm thinking to myself like, what the heck is going on? But to hear the OG nurses tell it, rates were like $1,400, $1,500 before COVID. So rates are still higher now than what they were before COVID. And I'm just grateful to make more than I would as a staff nurse, simply. Okay. Another place is Reddit. I just follow a Simple Nursing Reddit, and it's really just a place where people come on there to crack jokes and talk. Like, us nurses get exhausted and run down too, or have crazy experiences. I've never seen anyone violate HIPAA or anything like that, give patient details away. But they will talk about their experience and they will crack some jokes. I've seen some funny things on Reddit. So it's nice, like if you've had a hard day, you can go somewhere and vent. HIPAA, remember HIPAA. It's also nice to go on there and read things that other people have posted, and maybe don't feel alone going through something hard, or maybe something, you know, makes you laugh and now you feel like you're in a better mood and you realize like, this is just like half of my life. Oh, my actual last piece of advice is taxes, my friend. I have done my taxes myself every year, but it is totally up to you to go pay someone to let them do it for you or to do it yourself. I prefer to do it myself because I think it's really simple to just follow the steps and put the information in. I've also read that you're less likely to get flagged if you do it yourself, but I've also read that it increases your chances of getting flagged if you do. I don't know. I do it myself, you have that option. But this is another reason to keep your documents and to have everything ready to go. So when tax season comes, you can put that information in there and you don't have to worry about none of it. You will pay taxes in different states. I have gotten a tax refund with every year. Just make sure that when your taxes are coming out, that it's coming out for enough money to where you do not have to pay the state back or pay the federal government back. So make sure your taxes are coming out of your check because they will come for their money. Those are my tips, and let's get into how to become a travel nurse.